Sermon of the Week debate based on the book of Job. Well, I don't know. Do you? Jay asked. I don't know either, but I think you've been robbed, Bill said. Of what? Of things, of family, of comforts, of friends, Bill said. You're wrong. Look here in front of you. 3 of my best friends have stuck with me, Jay said. Yeah, but I don't see any others. You know, I don't see anyone else. Where's your brother? Where's your sister or Uncle George? I don't see them here, Pete said. How long you 3 been here? Jay asked. The 3 of us, your only friends in the world, have been here a week. We've stayed at the Holiday Inn in town at night. Why wouldn't you talk to me? It has taken you a week to even speak to me. We didn't know what to say, Zeb said. You could have at least said hello. Yes, I lost a lot, but I'm still alive. I'm still a human. I'm still your friend. I can't believe you wouldn't even say hello, Jay said. We thought you were praying or meditating or grieving, Zeb said. Yeah, I was doing all that, Jay said, adding, I wasn't sure he was listening after what I went through, but I was still alive. I wish I hadn't been born, but I was still alive. Maybe suicide would be an option. If all that happened to me, I wouldn't want to live, Bob said. Yeah, now you're homeless. Maybe it's time to move on to heaven or hell or purgatory or wherever humans go after they die, Zeb said. We could help you if you can't bring yourself to do it. I know a doctor in town who has experience in assisted suicide for the terminally ill, Pete said. Excuse me. I'm not terminally ill, I'm just terminally poor, Jay said sharply. What's the difference? You have no future, you have no family. Why not end it and start over on Mars or Jupiter, or wherever God takes you next, Zeb said. I had a lot. I was no king, but I had a lot and led a good life. Oh, I wasn't perfect, but on balance, I think I did more good than bad, Jay said honestly. The 3 friends nodded in agreement. Then Bob said, But that apparently isn't enough. Our God is just unjust. Look at all the suffering in our world. War, famine, disease. It goes on and on and on. I think you're wrong. God doesn't make war on man. Man does. No, God has kept me alive for some reason, and as long as he wants me alive, I'll try to find and act on that reason. Jay, buddy, God's very busy. He doesn't care about you or what happens to you. We're like ants. Hundreds die every day. He reached down and put a little ant in his hand. This little ant never did anything wrong, but I'm going to squash him just the same before he bites me. Ouch! Zeb crushed the ant and began rubbing his rapidly swelling hand. I curse God every day. I lost my cousin to cancer. God should have saved him, but he let him die, Pete said. I take God's name in vain every day, too. Everyone does. No big deal. God isn't listening. He's out making a new king or creating a new planet or something, Bob said. Or torturing our poor friend here, Zeb said. If I was you, pal, I'd curse God every day from now on. God is not fair. I think God actually died and the devil has taken over. He is at least not as vengeful as God was. God flooded the whole earth, killed everyone. All but 8, Jay corrected. Maybe you 3 are right, but I'm going to carry on and find out why this all happened to me and see what the future holds. Here, we brought you some junk food, Milky Ways, Fritos, and stuff. Watch out so the ants don't get to it, Bob said. Thanks, Jay said. We got to get back to work tomorrow. Tomorrow's Monday. We'll check in on you maybe Wednesday. I think you'll have a change of heart by then, Bob said. Thanks again, guys. Have a good week, Jay said. You have a better week, Jay, Bob said. The other 2 nodded. I will, Jay said. He picked out a caramel Milky Way from the sack and began chewing away on it, all the while staring at an anthill filled with innocent ants. Soon he noticed one was heading his way, so he chewed a little faster. The second one now followed the first. He gulped down the last of the Milky Way bar. It was the super large size. He then threw the wrapper at the train of ants, and they made a beeline, or ant line, for it. He shook his head and sighed. There must be a reason, he said under his breath. The justice of God has been debated from the beginning of time on the earth. It is still a hot topic, though, with the increasing trend toward atheism or the world having no God and just evolving from something or nothing, it has lost some of its popular appeal. If there is no God, then why is not our world a better place? One of the hallmarks of evolution is the theory of survival of the fittest. If the fittest life forms are the ones that survive, then why is the world such a terrible place? Why do epidemic viruses and bacteria survive when they likely would have killed off everything on this planet by now? How did the Black Plague come about when evolution should have eliminated that bacteria? Why does the serial killer or the terrorist not disappear for the same reason? How did dinosaurs disappear when they were the original kings of the jungle, at least as far as our fossil record tells us? And how come everyone is not evolved into a super race that is Adolf Hitler? Why is everyone not 12 feet tall and living 400 years? In fact, if the survival of the fittest holds, why does anyone die at all? The stock answer to all this speculation is that man hasn't been on the earth long enough, but it all will happen in time. The Bible says man has existed on this earth for some 6,000 years. The Septuagint adds some years and gives us some 7,000. Paleoanthropology initially determined man was some 10 to 15,000 years old, but then skulls such as Peking man began turning up. In 1974, Lucy, Australopithecus afarensis, was discovered in Ethiopia, throwing everything out the window. She was dated to 3.2 million years ago, and more recent finds may have pushed the date of man's first existence back to 500 million years or more. The recently departed Stephen Hawking, arguably the most intelligent person to live on our Earth, calculated the universe to be 13.8 billion years old, some 7 billion years more than when I took science courses several years ago. If man has existed on the Earth for at least 50 million years, how is it that he has not evolved into a close to perfect super race by now? Charles Darwin, the author of The Theory of Evolution, gave his finches 1 million or so years to develop into 7 different species on the island of Galapagos. Man should be living forever by now. There should be no death or dying anymore, and by now man should be getting along with himself. There should be no more war, no more controversy, no more murders. However, the truth of the matter is that none of this has happened, at least so far. Maybe in another 50 million years this will happen, but as the current human lifespan approaches 80 years, none of us will ever see it. Oh, hey, Cousin Eddie. It's good to see you. Have a seat. Tell me how you been. Cousin Eddie stared at his cousin Jay in disbelief. Jay smelled of sweat and had matted hair and dust all over himself. I was passing through town and I overheard 3 guys talking about you in the bar. What happened to you? I can't, as you can see, I've lost everything. My family, my land, my livestock, my clothes, my dignity, all, Jay said dejectedly. But why? How? What on earth happened? Was it the army? Those terrorist Egyptians or the Assyrians? Cousin Eddie asked exasperatedly. No, nothing like that. One night my Mary came down ill. The next morning she was full of black sores. By the next night she was dead. The rest of my family soon got the plague too, and within 2 weeks they were all gone, Jay said, tears staining his dusty face. But you, why didn't you? I don't know. I just don't know. God spared me for some reason. I just don't. But the livestock? Oh, the county commissioner came out and said I had to put down all the stock, then burn the barn and the house, or they'd do it for me. What about the county? Did anyone else get sick? Not so I've heard, so far anyway. Cousin Eddie extended his hand. Keep away from me. Do you want to get this too? He pulled up his sleeve, exposing his bare arm. The boils were numerous, but were starting to heal. I'd have come sooner, but I didn't know. Was on a trip to Alexandria, an awesome place. You gotta go there. Realizing his mistake, he continued, when you're well, of course. That'll be a while, if at all. God did this to me, and I don't know why, but he must have some reason. I should be dead, but here I am. I wish I were dead, or had not even been born, but... Well, all I can say is that God is just. We all will suffer adversity at one time or another, though it is not our own fault. But God is just, and his judgment is always correct. We cannot question our Maker, our Sustainer. He is always right, and we often are not, though in our own eyes we do no wrong. Cousin Eddie took a breath. You believe that? Jay asked, staring off into the distance. I'm not sure I do anymore. You have to, cousin. We all have to. The patriarchs like Adam and Methuselah have written about it. They believed it. And look how long they lived. Yeah, but Adam didn't do a thing wrong. Eve let him into it. Who among us can refuse a beautiful woman anything, Jay said. You're right there, Cousin Eddie said. I was in a club in Alexandria, the Clio it's called. This spectacular goddess approached me and, well... You? Jay said. Cousin Eddie nodded. See, Cousin Eddie said. I committed adultery, and here I am, walking around healthy and wealthy. But not wise, Jay said, now staring toward the sun low in the western sky. My point exactly. God cannot do evil or be unjust because he is God, King, ruler of us all. He does what he wills and deals with man as he wishes. He has not taken into account man's actions. We are like ants. Some live, some die. We all die, cousin, Jay said, wishing he had another Milky Way. Got any food, cousin? Eddie reached into his pocket and pulled out a caramel Milky Way. He threw it Jay's way. You're a lifesaver, cousin, Jay said, peeling back the wrapper. No, God has that honor. Yeah, I hear what you say, but now that I'm on the other side of things, I see things a little different. True, God is our judge, and he can do anything he wishes, but I think he does care about us little ants, and at least a little bit. I think he does care what we do from time to time and how we live, Jay said pensively. How can you say that going through what you just did? Any caring God would have at least limited the damage. You got nothing left. I got you. I got 3 friends in town. Friends? Those morons? Eddie said with disdain. Oh, sorry, there probably are okay guys, but they have got it all wrong. You got that right. They wanted me to curse God and then commit suicide rather they would take me to someone who would help me do it. I'm too chicken. Yeah, Alexandria is full of those kind of doctors. Big signs, only cost 2 shekels. That even covers the cost of the burial. Huh. Jay chuckled. I guess I'm just not ready, or God isn't. You know, I've been doing a little talking to him lately. Probably hallucinating from this heat, Cousin Eddie said. No, I've had a few conversations with him lately. Well, I'm me and I'm him. Yeah, he'd got to you. Well, I better get going. I'm sure Rachel is anxious to see me after a week. I'm going to show her some of those new Egyptian moves I learned. Now wait, hear me out. I talked to God a bit, and some of what he told me made some sense. Then a couple nights ago I had a dream. In that dream he told me some things I already knew. He said that he had created our world and everything in it, ants too, and he fed us all and sustained us all. He said he sent the rain that makes the Nile flow and the seed grow. He kept the stars of the universe in their orbits, even could rearrange the stars. Said no one or no thing could do anything like he could. Nice dream and true, but it just verifies God is just no matter what he does. I present you the flood, Cousin Eddie said in a righteous tone. After I awoke, I talked with God some more. I looked at my arm and realized my arm was so feeble compared to my God's. Why, he can bring a thunderstorm. He can go catch a sea dragon from the Mediterranean with a little hook if he chooses. You know, the ones with the scales? I didn't see one on this last trip, but they have pictures of them in Alexandria, all over the markets, a big seller. You can set up like a king like Alexander, then bring him down just as quickly. He can win a war, build a city, and then burn it down, Jay said. Or cause a plague, Cousin Eddie said, standing. Yeah, Jay said. Well, good luck. I'll try to stop by in a week or so. Let me know if you need anything, Cousin Eddie said. The sun was now halfway below the horizon. Milky Ways, the caramel ones, Jay said. Will do, Cousin Eddie said, raising his thumb in the air. He then turned and walked briskly down the hill. As he did so, he noticed a little itch on his left thigh. He stopped, let down his jeans, but could see nothing in the dim light. Couldn't be. I didn't even touch him. He pulled up his jeans and walked briskly toward the west, a big smile on his face. For years, I believed the Bible was written in chronological order. That is, Genesis was the oldest book and the rest followed. Down the line, it became popular knowledge that Job was the oldest book in the Bible, written by Moses of some unknown Israelite author about 1500 B.C. One accepted timeline of history has Moses born in 1530 B.C., the Exodus from Egypt beginning 80 years later in 1450 B.C., and Israel's arrival at Canaan's door 40 years after that in 1410 B.C. However, analysis ain't what it used to be. An exhaustive analysis by many scholars has now moved the date of Job's book to about 600 B.C., some 900 years later than what I was first taught. How can this be, you ask? Well, there are now scholars for every imaginable facet of life. History is not excluded. There are people who date manuscripts with carbon-14 or some other method. There are people who study parchments and other printing materials. There are people who study languages to amazing depths. There are people who study history, maybe of only one race or tribe or culture. Analyzing all this data has yielded the date of 600 BC. One of the sticking points to the 1500 BC date is that the language in Job seems to reflect Greek contact. So even 600 BC might be a stretch. In any event, the book is old. How many versions of the Bible have there been? There are 8 major versions. The Septuagint in Greek, 250 AD. The Vulgate in Latin, 400 AD. Luther's Bible in German, 1534 AD, King James Version in English, 1611 AD, the Revised Standard Version in American English, 1952 AD, and the New International Version in Contemporary English, 1970 AD. There are 6,877 known languages, and the Bible has been translated into 2,900 of these. Those are massive numbers, and in that many versions there are bound to be a lot of word and idea variations. Yet God has managed to keep His history and His ideals in place in every one of those 2,900. The odds against that happening are staggering, yet it's true. The Bible is still the Bible no matter what version or language you read it in. Many books are written piecemeal. Authors will tell you that maybe one day they had an idea. Maybe 2 weeks later they remembered it and wrote it down. Then maybe 6 months later they tried to make it into a story. Maybe they got one chapter done, then went to another project, or took a trip, or got a new job. Then a year or two later they found the time to write the actual book. I think the Bible was written just that way. How did anyone know about Adam? Was it just remembered? Unlikely after 930 years. Then a flood came along. How did all the records survive all that water? When you climbed into that boat, the last thing those 8 people wanted to remember was the past. Yet that knowledge has survived. The book of Job may have been written in similar fashion. Job likely lived around the time of Moses and wrote about his experiences and misery. Maybe it was just on a couple tablets, but it may have been passed down, and eventually his powerful story became a book. This premise leads to the possibility of complete credibility of Job's book. "Hi, Grandpa," the little 6-year-old said as he sauntered into Job's burned-out house. Hi, Joe. How are you?" "My, you've grown," Job said, his eyes beaming. "How old are you now?" Job said. "I'm 6.5, almost 7, Joe said. He walked toward his grandpa, but Job motioned for him to stay put. "Don't get too close, Joe," Job said. "Why?" Joe asked. "I've been sick and I'm not well yet. I don't want you to get sick." He pulled up his sleeve to show the boy the healing boils on his arm. "Wow, that must hurt," Joe exclaimed. "No, not anymore, but it did. It hurt awful," Job said. "So how's school? Are you learning a lot? Who's your teacher?" Job's lonesomeness was showing, but Joe took it in stride. "Good. First grade. Math is great. Miss January is her name." Joe spit out the answers like nothing. "What else are you learning?" "Science is great. We're studying dinosaurs this week." "I love dinosaurs," Joe said, looking around the burned-out room. "Do you have any toys I can play with, Grandpa?" "No, sorry I don't. Everything was burned up," Job said. He went on. "You know, my great-uncle once saw a herd of dinosaurs in the Sahara." "Where's that?" Joe asked. "Oh, that's down south where we all once lived," Job said. "I'd like to go there sometime. Will you take me?" Joe asked. "When I get well, we'll take a trip down to Egypt," Job promised, suddenly realizing he might not be able to keep the promise. "I can go next week. We have spring break." Job smiled, knowing he better get well. "Have you ever seen a dinosaur, Grandpa?" Joe asked. "I saw a young tyrannosaur down in the Jerusalem Zoo when I was about your age. I think he's dead now," Job said. "How about you?" "My cousin and I saw a stegosaurus up in the hills behind our house last summer. Big guy." Joe stretched his hands wide apart for effect. "I don't think... Maybe it was a rhino." Job knew he was on shaky turf. "No, he had those wedges and the spears on his tail. He was a stegosaurus." Job knew better than to argue with anyone smarter than himself. "When we saw a sea monster on our last fishing trip, he had scales and he breathed fire." "Did your dad see him?" "Yeah, we all did." "Grandpa, I got a girlfriend," Joe said, changing the subject. "You do? What's her name?" Daisy Ann." "How old is she?" "Oh, she's a little older. She's almost 9, Joe said." "Is she nice?" Job asked. "She's the prettiest girl in the whole school," Joe said, beaming. "Do you have a girlfriend, Grandpa?" No, I don't," Job said. He felt the pain of a salty tear fill his right eye. "Because I overheard my teacher say she was looking for a new boyfriend," Joe said. "Well, I gotta go, Grandpa. Bye." With that, Joe was off. The little child shall lead them is always appropriate. Their intelligence is astounding. They seem to know many things that we don't. I am always amazed how children are so taken with dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are massive creatures and can kill with a single bite, but the museums are filled with children who seem to have no fear of them whatsoever. Where did that come from? Maybe we have some innate knowledge built into our DNA. Someday we'll find out. The Bible's full of dragons. In the King James Version they are mentioned 22 times in the Old Testament and 12 times in the New Testament, all in the book of Revelation. The first mention of dragons is in Deuteronomy 32:33. Speaking of wayward Israel, it states, "Their wine is the poison of dragons." Jeremiah refers to them 6 times. In Job, the word is not used, rather a more severe description is given. Job then begins a conversation with God. "Behold now the behemoth which I made with thee." He refers to making dinosaurs at the same time he made man. "Eateth grass as an ox. Lo, now his strength is in his loins, and his force is in the navel of his belly. He moveth his tail like a cedar. The sinews of his stones are wrapped together. His bones are as strong as pieces of brass. His bones are like bars of iron. He is the chief of the ways of God. He that made him can make his sword to approach unto him." Job 40:15-19. Suggestions are that this behemoth would be an elephant or a hippopotamus, but neither has anything like a cedar tree for a tail. But of course our friend the T-Rex does, and he also has massive stones, which refer to thighs. God continues in chapter 41. God provides his answer to Job's humbleness in the description of Job's powerful creature. Verse 1. Canst thou draw out the Leviathan with an hook, or his tongue with a cord which thou lettest down? Verse 10. None is so fierce that dare to stir him up. Who then is able to stand before me? Verse 14. Who can open the doors of his face? His teeth are terrible round about. His scales are his pride, shut up together as with a close seal. We can't use a hook to fish for whales with a hook. Only the smaller sperm whale has any teeth, and no whales have scales. No, God's referring here to a sea monster, a massive scaled beast. The sightings of the Loch Ness Monster or similar monsters never makes mention of scales. History is filled with stories and sightings of dragons and sea monsters. From the Americas to Europe to India, the lore is full. Chinese history and literature is particularly full of these fire-breathing monsters. The most famous dragon is that of St. George, who is referenced in the 6th century A.D. That dragon lived in a lake in Libya and kept eating the town's sheep, so the town then left 2 sheep by the lake each morning. Eventually it ate all the sheep up, and the town placated it by offering their own children. One day the king's daughter's number came up in the lottery. St. George then arrived, and when the dragon came out of the lake to eat the princess, he stabbed it with his lance and subdued it by making the sign of the cross. St. George then led the dragon into town and demanded that all in the town convert to Christianity. This done, he then killed the dragon. A myth, you say? Fantasy? Hogwash? Maybe. But if you believe in God, he says it right to Job's face, right in Job's book, right in God's book, right in the inspired Word of God, his Bible. God says he created dinosaurs and sea monsters. I repeat, a myth, you say. Man has no original thought, or at least very little. He must see things to believe they exist. The myriad of historical information verifies that man has seen dinosaurs. Other evidence is creeping out, such as human tracks being found with dinosaur tracks, the existence of humanity being pushed farther and farther back in time, such as Lucy, and the giant skeletons being excavated all around the planet. So what does all this debatery have to do with justice? In a word, everything. The life of Job is the perfect example. Job was living the perfect life with a perfect family, all the comforts and no problems. Suddenly, through no fault of his own, his world came crumbling down. And there, in front of him, and he is left homeless, penniless, and friendless. His former friends come by, and their debate goes on for chapter after chapter with no real conclusion. Possibly it's God's fault, possibly it's Job's, maybe it's just bad luck. Through it all, Job somehow maintains his respect for God and his justice. Finally, it comes to Job. I am vile, Job 44. Job realizes he is not perfect and does not live in a perfect world. Things happen. People get sick and die. It's been going on for at least 2,000 years by Job's time, and it isn't going to stop. Job 40, verse 6. Then answered the Lord unto Job. God then begins to describe his workings and his character to Job, verse 41:11, or chapter 41, verse 11. This verse gives Job a little glimpse. Who hath prevented me that I should repay him? Whatsoever is under the whole heaven is mine. And in chapter 42, Job finally gets it completely. I know that thou canst do everything, and that no thought can be withholden from thee. Who is he that hideth counsel without knowledge? Therefore I have uttered that I understand not, things too wonderful for me, which I knew not. Job 42, verses 2 and 3. There's the crux right there. I uttered that I understood not, things too wonderful for me, which I knew not. I uttered that I understood not, things too wonderful for me, which I knew not. Job has said many things he did not understand. He could not understand them all. He didn't know anything about them. Job finally realized he was not God. He realized his knowledge, human knowledge, was very limited. He realized he would never be able to be capable of fully understanding God. But he also realized that his recent misfortune was not a punishment, not a judgment, but a way God used to explain himself to Job and the world. Humans are not God. They are humans. We can't understand God. Stephen Hawking waffled back and forth on the small problem of how the universe began. Big Bang, creator, spontaneous, or other. We humans can't even grasp the concept of forever or time. The Bible says time will end, Revelation 10:6. How are we going to live then? No clock, no sunrise. What will we use to maintain our bearings? I don't know, but I'm anxious to find out. Job and Lucifer are kind of alike. They both had it all, the perfect life, but they both weren't satisfied. They wanted more. They wanted control. They wanted to do things their way. Lucifer was not God or even a god. He was and is just another angel, and his rebellion became a disaster. Job could have marched down that same path. We are not told he was thinking that way, but again we are. I am vile, he says in Job 44. I abhor myself and repent in dust and ashes, Job 41:6. Yes, Job knew what he was and knew who God was. In the end, after all he went through, he realized God was God. God was just. He must not always question God. God did and does know best. He realized he must follow God or he would eventually cease to exist. Jesus was the only human being or angel who ever fully grasped the concept that God is God. The argument is that Jesus had an unfair advantage. He had lived in heaven. But that argument falls flat. Lucifer lived there for we don't know how long. Adam and Eve lived in a perfect Eden for at least 100 years. Job had a perfect life, but he never remotely suffered like Jesus. All kinds of angels lived in heaven, yet 1/3 wanted out. The resultant trail of tears is endless. Grandpa. Hi, how are you doing? 2 weeks had gone by, and Joe was back to see his grandpa Job. Hi, Joe. I'm getting a little better, Job said without conviction. Do you have any toys yet for me to play with? Joe asked. No, not yet, but I will the next time you come, I promise, he said again without conviction. Grandpa, I brought you a present. Job's eyes lit up. See, it's a dinosaur, a T-Rex. Joe held it high. Hey, that's great, thanks, Job said, a rare smile creasing his dusty face. He reached for the T-Rex. But Grandpa, can I borrow it to play with? Job's smile widened. Sure, Joe, sure, go ahead. With that, Joe began walking the T-Rex around the scorched table in the center of the room. Grandpa, can you come to my school next Friday? Joe asked as he charcoaled the T-Rex's feet. Sure, I think I'm healed enough. We're doing a play. It's called The Red Sea. It's about when Moses